Thad Gets to the Moon, written by Ruth Merttens. Once upon a time, there was a spaceman called Thad. Of course, Thad was not a real spaceman. He was a toy. He had a rocket and a space station. And he lived in the toy box under Billy's bed. But Thad was not a happy spaceman. True, he was well looked after, and there were other toys for company, but Thad remained sad. He wanted to be real. He wanted to take off in his rocket like a real astronaut. He wanted to land on the moon and bounce around on it like Neil Armstrong. On moonlit nights, Thad would sit on the windowsill next to his rocket, getting as close as possible to the big round white face. He was desperate to visit the moon. One night, just as Thad was about to give up looking at the moon and return to the toy box, he saw something which made him jump. There in the corner of the sky was another rocket. Thad watched carefully. The rocket got larger. It seemed like it was heading towards Earth. Thad stared as the rocket came closer and closer. It was starting to look a lot like his rocket. The rocket came speeding out of the sky and came gently to rest in the garden just below the window. Thad could not believe his eyes. It was identical in every detail to his own small rocket. Thad jumped down and threw himself downstairs and out into the garden. There, beside what was definitely a larger version of his own rocket, was a big spaceman looking just like Thad. Thad looked up. The spaceman beckoned. Thad followed him into the enormous rocket. They were staring at the moon. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have liftoff! The big spaceman moved a lever and with scarcely a jerk the rocket lifted off the ground and sped towards the moon. They landed near a crater. The rocket settled gently into the dust. The spaceman opened the door and jumped carefully out. Thad was standing on the moon. Thad lifted one foot. He felt amazingly light. He lifted the other foot. He jumped. He realized that he could easily jump as high as his own height. It was fantastic. The spaceman laughed. He ran, taking great leaping bounds away from the ship and up towards the nearest crater. Thad followed, laughing at how easy it was to run and jump. As they approached the edge of the crater, the spaceman put his finger on his lips. He motioned Thad to lie down. Together they crawled up the side of the mound and peered over the rim into the center of the crater. Thad stared down in wonder. There, at the bottom of the crater, some small green creatures were moving. There were lots of them gathered round the edge of the crater, and more of them were rushing around in the middle. Thad peered over the rim of the crater, open-mouthed, hardly daring to breathe. He realized he was watching a sort of alien football match. The creatures in the middle were rushing around what looked like several small pinpricks of light. Every now and then, one of the tiny lights would flare up and blaze. Thad was so intrigued, he wriggled up to get closer to the edge. Just as he leaned right over to get a really good look, he heard a different noise. Thad was about to turn round and look behind them when he realized that the noise was being made by the crowd. They'd spotted Thad and his large friend. Thad looked at the spaceman. The spaceman did not mess about. He started running down the crater, back towards the rocket. He was taking great leaps and almost flying. Thad set off. He could hear the sound growing behind him, but he did not stop to look around. He ran after his friend, trying to copy the easy way in which the spaceman leapt. Finally, they both reached the rocket. Without waiting to talk, they leapt into the safety of the chairs and pressed the button to close the entry hatch. The door snapped shut and blast off! The rocket sped through space and re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. Before Thad knew it, they were landing with the same gentleness as before on the grass outside Thad's window. Thad turned to say something to his large space friend, but before he could utter a word, the spaceman turned to face him and gazed seriously at Thad. Then he put his finger to his lips. When Thad thought about it afterwards, he always wondered how, without words, he had known what the spaceman was telling him. This is our secret. But do you know what? Thad never told anyone about his magical, amazing trip, nor about the fantastic sight he had seen on the moon. But when the other toys teased him, he just smiled quietly. He knew the secret of his journey.